a room cloaked in secrecy, dimly lit by flickering torches, its shadows dancing across frescoed walls adorned with grotesque scenes of gods intertwined in hedonistic abandon. Moans, whispers, and terrified whimpers echo softly through the marble corridors of the palace, blending seamlessly into the night. No one dares approach, for this is the emperor's private domain, a chamber infamous for unimaginable excesses, perversions whispered fearfully behind closed doors. Caligula's bedchamber. Who was this man whose mere name evokes shivers even centuries later? Accounts portray him as a ruler driven by unpredictable whims, characterized by extravagant vanity, insatiable lust, and relentless brutality. Whether it was humiliating senators publicly or spending fortunes on lavish spectacles, his appetite for excess was insatiable. But it was his intimate life, his nocturnal escapades shrouded in darkness, that became Rome's most whispered and scandalous secret. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus in history better remembers him by his childhood nickname Caligula, meaning little boot. Initially adored, Caligula rose to the throne in 37 AD amid joyous celebration. It was an extravagant yet sinister space where rumors of unspeakable acts thrived. Aristocrats murmured nervously about strange midnight summonses, from which some never returned, or returned forever changed, silent and haunted. Beyond mere hedonism, his bedroom acts reflected a darker, more sinister craving. Victims, as many ancient rumors hinted, were not just coerced but tormented physically and psychologically. The stories, so sparse in documented detail, echoed chillingly. Screams muffled by thick curtains, pleas silenced by God's hands, or worse yet, the emperor's own. Even the elite, secure in their own privilege, shivered at the thought of being called upon to join Caligula's nocturnal entertainments. Vast wealth flowed freely, bringing extravagant luxury alongside stark inequality and moral decay. Rome's ruling elite were captivated by a culture of hedonistic indulgence, public spectacles, and private pleasures. Entertainment frequently crossed into cruelty. Gladiatorial combats, executions turned spectacles, lavish orgies held behind aristocratic doors. According to sources, the room's opulent decor, gold-encrusted furniture, silk-draped walls, and intricate mosaics depicting explicit acts at God's mast, its true function is a den of depravity and cruelty. His every act, no matter how shocking, seemed an extension of a society where pleasure and pain blurred dangerously together. The emperor's behavior, though extreme, mirrored the decadence and moral ambiguity that permeated Rome's highest ranks. Still, the most grotesque details remained shrouded in euphemism or omitted altogether, dismissed as too horrific to record openly. What could have happened in those shadowed rooms? Who were his victims? And what torments did they endure at his hands? Raised amid brutality and secrecy, Caligula was molded into a creature capable of both immense charm and shocking cruelty. Driven by impulses shaped since childhood within the imperial court's toxic environment, his bedroom horrors, whispered about in corridors, survived only through fragmented texts, veiled references, and gossip. Guarded fiercely by the loyal or fearful elite, who benefited from or were complicit in the emperor's twisted games. Others, however, contend that these accounts, though lurid, only scratched the surface, hinting at deeper horrors historians dared not fully record. The balance between historical fact and sensationalized legend continues to fuel fascination with this Roman emperor, whose brief rule still captivates and horrifies centuries later. Was it fear of imperial retribution that hushed chroniclers, or did later historians recoil from explicitly chronicling the monstrous details of his reign? The city's grand forums, usually buzzing with trade, politics, and gossip, became places of anxious whispers, shared glances, and knowing nods. Citizens spoke quietly about disappearances, sudden and bizarre punishments that seemed to tie inexplicably to those late-night summons to the emperor's quarters. Romans, weary from the stern austerity of his predecessor Tiberius, welcomed the young emperor's reign, hoping for brighter days. Yet, within mere months, hope curdled into dread as Caligula descended into a maelstrom of cruelty, paranoia, and debauchery. A figure who straddles myth and reality, Caligula's brief reign became synonymous with tyranny. Yet, history often prefers silence, burying its darkest tales deep beneath layers of dust and denial. Ancient historians, from Suetonius to Cassius Dio, left tantalizingly lurid hints about Caligula's private debauchery. Regardless of the reason, Caligula's private chambers have become one of history's most mysterious and disturbing enigmas. The forbidden chamber, just its mention, conjures dread and curiosity in equal measure. Located deep within Rome's imperial palace on Palatine Hill, this chamber was more than mere sleeping quarters. Servants whispered of secret doors and hidden passages used to smuggle in unwilling participants for the emperor's amusement. It was said Caligula's appetite was insatiable, not just in desire but in cruelty. Such tales, once whispered fearfully among palace servants and senators, gradually seeped beyond the marble walls, poisoning Rome's bustling streets with dread. Yet for all the gossip, tangible evidence of Caligula's true bedroom horrors remained elusive, hidden within the walls of the palace. To truly understand the depths of these horrors, one must first comprehend the world that allowed such depravity to fester. Ancient Rome during Caligula's reign was an empire intoxicated by its own power and excess. Against this backdrop of normalized excess, Caligula stood not as an anomaly but as a grotesque exaggeration, an inevitable outcome of unchecked power. Moreover, Caligula inherited a palace rife with intrigue, betrayal, and paranoia, shaped by his predecessor Tiberius himself, notorious for sexual excesses and ruthless eliminations. But how much of Caligula's rumored depravity was truth, and how much exaggeration or political slander? Historical sources have long debated this. Some modern historians argue that contemporary accounts exaggerated Caligula's crimes as propaganda, deliberately inflating his villainy to justify his violent end. Thus, the truth of Caligula's bedroom atrocities lies tantalizingly between fact and myth, leaving historians and the public endlessly intrigued. Yet even with centuries separating us, the whispers still persist. Stories of Caligula's monstrous bedroom rituals barely hinted at in surviving documents, a darkness so profound that even the most depraved rulers who followed seemed tame by comparison. These questions linger, gripping historians and curious minds alike, ensuring Caligula's horrifying legacy endures, forever etched into history as the emperor who turned his private quarters into chambers of terror. As we venture deeper, prepare yourself. What lies ahead are tales of dark deeds, hidden secrets, and forbidden truths that Rome itself wished to forget. Deep beneath the luxurious facade of Caligula's imperial palace, secrets brewed unthinkable and unspeakable. As whispers penetrated Rome's bustling streets, citizens strained their ears, desperate for truth yet terrified by what they might discover. Under the veil of entertainment, guests were coerced into grotesque displays at the emperor's whim. Ancient historian Suetonius chillingly notes how Caligula enjoyed turning Rome's noblest citizens into helpless pawns, humiliated for his twisted amusement. Roman historian Cassius Dio speaks cautiously yet unequivocally about Caligula's disturbing fixation with his sisters, particularly Drusilla. Their bond, unnatural in its intensity, raised eyebrows even in a society accustomed to lax morals. According to ancient testimonies, the emperor took pleasure in breaking his victims' spirits. He forced families to watch helplessly as loved ones endured unspeakable humiliations. Those who knew most, the palace servants, guards, and courtiers, remained silent, choosing survival over justice. Accounts hint darkly at psychological torture that destroyed minds as effectively as physical torment. Over centuries, these fragments coalesced into a portrait of a ruler whose depravity transcended mere excess, becoming legendary in its cruelty. Drusilla, treated like an empress, was rumored to share Caligula's bed openly, a scandal that sent shockwaves through the imperial palace. He transformed his private quarters into a stage where absolute power and total submission merged, creating a macabre performance designed to affirm his godlike status. One infamous account speaks of how Caligula invited senators and their wives to lavish banquets, events that began with grace but devolved into disturbing scenes of degradation. It was within the emperor's private chambers that Caligula indulged in acts so shocking that even the most hardened Roman chroniclers hesitated to detail explicitly. Sources describe how he would summon young aristocrats, men and women alike, forced into nightmarish ordeals, their dignity and humanity stripped away in the emperor's relentless pursuit of perverse gratification. The answers may be more horrific than history ever dared reveal, yet the true horrors occurred behind closed doors, away from prying eyes and whispered warnings. The most scandalous of Caligula's reported depravities centered around incestuous obsessions. Courtiers who protested or resisted faced cruel punishments, torture, or worse, becoming playthings in the emperor's grotesque fantasies. An environment of paranoia enveloped the palace. Trust evaporated, replaced by suspicion, betrayal, and fear. The boundaries of morality dissolved utterly under Caligula's reign. Beyond mere scandal, Caligula's depravity had tangible, horrifying consequences. Even more haunting were the tales of Caligula's deliberate use of psychological torment. Historical evidence further suggests Caligula's excesses weren't spontaneous. They were meticulously orchestrated rituals, reinforcing his dominance and control. Yet how could such horrors persist unchecked? The answer lies partly in Rome's culture of fear, where speaking out meant certain doom. But not every whisper died unheard. Surviving testimonies, though scarce, preserved fragments of Caligula's nightmare. As historians piece together this grotesque puzzle, the question remains: what more terrifying truths have been lost to time, silenced forever within Caligula's shadowy chambers? Caligula's bedroom was not merely a sanctuary of self-indulgence, it was a temple of domination, a theater where he choreographed acts of depravity to affirm his absolute control over body, soul, and empire. Each night unfolded like a twisted ritual, meticulously designed to blur the lines between power and perversion. In these intimate horrors, Caligula did not simply revel in pleasure, he weaponized it. According to scattered yet persistent accounts, Caligula constructed elaborate ceremonies in his chambers. Victims, whether senators' sons, noble daughters, or slaves, were adorned in ceremonial attire resembling Roman deities, mimicking gods and goddesses, as Caligula saw himself not as mortal emperor but as a divine being. He fancied himself Jupiter reborn, wielding thunder not through storm but through terror. He ordered participants to act out mythological tragedies with one grotesque twist. The violence and abuse were real, bound and helpless. Many were forced into scenes of simulated worship, sometimes reenacting violent myths such as the abduction of Persephone or the rape of Leda. Except in Caligula's chamber, no acting was needed. Pain was not a metaphor, it was the spectacle. More chilling was his obsession with audience. As some accounts reveal, Caligula did not always indulge in these rituals alone. Selected courtiers and guards were commanded to watch silently, forbidden to look away. Their presence served as witnesses and affirmers of the emperor's divine dominance. To refuse even to flinch was to invite punishment. Testimonies suggest that even children were not spared. Suetonius alludes, with veiled revulsion, to the presence of young boys and girls taken from aristocratic families, reared within the palace as if pets or groomed to entertain. Some were allegedly raised knowing no life outside Caligula's perverse needs. Whether these details were slander or bitter truth, they reflect the darkness of perception surrounding his rule. But it wasn't just sexual cruelty that marked these nights, it was psychological dismantling. The emperor played twisted games, turning friends into betrayers. He would promise a victim release if they could persuade a loved one to take their place, watching gleefully as bonds of loyalty shattered beneath impossible choices. Sometimes Caligula would present two victims and force them into a cruel contest, humiliation as performance, submission as sport. Losers were degraded, winners punished anyway, because in Caligula's chamber there were no victors, only subjects of his will. The emperor's own words, preserved in fragments by historians, hinted at his philosophy: let them hate me so long as they fear me. This wasn't simply tyranny, it was sadistic artistry. Fear was his brush, and human suffering his canvas. Power to him was not maintained through laws or governance, but through dread etched into the very flesh of those around him. It is perhaps no surprise, then, that even the Roman gods seemed complicit in the emperor's mind. Caligula's divine delusions became he demanded temples erected to his name, statues of Olympians replaced with his likeness. In one case, he infamously ordered a golden statue of himself placed in the temple of Jupiter, so offerings to the king of gods would instead go to him. If the gods did not fear him, then the people would. Some sources claim he even installed a brothel within the palace, staffed not by common prostitutes, but by noble women and men selected from Rome's highest families. They were forced to serve guests under threat of execution, their humiliation a nightly reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, was safe. Visitors were sometimes invited into the emperor's personal museum, where trophies from his most shameful acts were displayed. Blood-stained garments, broken ornaments, and tokens taken from those he had destroyed. But even a god in human form cannot escape the decay of paranoia. As months passed, Caligula's rituals became more erratic, more violent. Whispers grew louder, risks mounted, fear twisted inward. He became obsessed with betrayal, seeing enemies in shadows, threats in every glance. Some suggest that the very victims he had broken haunted him in dreams. He began lashing out randomly, executing allies, punishing loyalists for imagined slights. The emperor who had enslaved others to fear was now a prisoner of his own. Guards, once silent observers of his night terrors, began to avert their eyes. Courtiers faked illness to avoid the palace after dark. Even senators, once too afraid to speak, found common ground in whispered outrage. The line between madness and monstrosity was no longer blurred, it was obliterated. Rome had seen cruel emperors. It had endured excess and corruption. But what unfolded behind Caligula, his bedroom doors, marked a descent into something deeper. The spiritual mutilation of an empire. The rituals that took place there weren't merely perverse, they were sacrificial. And Rome's soul was the victim. But a question hangs still, like an echo in the chamber walls of Palatine Hill. How much of it was true? Could one man, no matter how powerful, truly commit such acts unchecked? Were these stories the fever dreams of later historians, desperate to justify an emperor's assassination? Or were they carefully constructed fictions, half-truths twisted by time into legend? Even if partially fabricated, the persistence of these accounts says something profound about Rome and its own trauma. The empire needed a monster to blame, a figure so dark that the collective sins of a decaying civilization could be projected onto him. And Caligula, with his blood-stained legacy, became that monster. But what if the stories were real? What if the screams that once echoed down marble halls weren't myth but memory? What if his chamber still holds secrets not metaphorical, but physical? Beneath layers of dust and centuries of silence, could artifacts remain? Could bones, parchments, or forbidden carvings still lie hidden, waiting to expose the final pieces of a truth too horrifying for ancient historians to bear? In the next and final part, we venture into the chilling aftermath of Caligula's death and the terrifying legacy he left behind him. Legacy so dark that Rome itself tried to erase every trace of it from memory. But some things refused to stay buried. It came without warning, swift and silent like the vengeance of the gods he so arrogantly mocked. On January 24, 41 AD, after just 4 years of reign, the emperor who believed himself divine fell not to armies or invaders, but to knives drawn by his own men. The final ritual of Caligula's tyranny was not one of his own making, but it was one he could not escape. The once terrified Praetorian guards, pushed beyond their limits by endless humiliation and madness, struck during a theatrical performance. Some wept not for the emperor, but from the years of repressed suffering finally released. Others looted the palace, storming the chambers that had once been cloaked in mystery and dread. Rumors tell of rooms hidden behind rooms, secret spaces filled with bizarre sculptures, explicit murals, and even skeletal remains of rituals that never reached public knowledge. Lured into a narrow hallway by a trusted officer, Caligula was surrounded and stabbed more than 30 times. His cries echoed briefly, then were swallowed by the silence of liberation. And yet, none quite matched the haunting aura that clung to Caligula's reign. Were children truly raised for his amusement, lives stolen before they even began? Some accounts contradict each other. Others read like feverish hallucinations. But they all agree on one thing. Caligula was feared, not just for his power but for the soul-chilling uncertainty of what he might do next. They ordered damnatio memoria, the ultimate Roman punishment, the erasure of a person from all records, all monuments, all history. Statues were destroyed, coins melted, his name scratched out from inscriptions, as though the act of forgetting could undo what he had done. But such diagnoses cannot capture the sheer theatricality of his terror. He didn't just torment, he turned torment into ritual. Pain was his liturgy, fear his scripture. But death did not stop the horror. It unleashed it. The people of Rome, long silenced by fear, erupted with a strange mix of joy and anxiety. They are born, raised, and empowered by society itself. Rome, in its lust for spectacle and control, created Caligula and then tried to forget him. But no erasure can undo the pain of those who suffered. In every palace, boardroom, or institution, no scratched-out name can silence the cries from behind those palace doors. Occasionally, strange things are found in documented chambers, erotic mosaics, and peculiar artifacts with no known context. Some speculate that Caligula's forbidden chamber may still exist, walled away, untouched by time, its secrets preserved like a tomb. If it is ever found, the world may finally see the physical evidence of the horrors long believed to be myth. But in every portrayal, his bedroom, his most private space, remains the heart of the horror. It represents the point where power sheds its mask, where the emperor is no longer ruler but beast. It is the place history itself tries to look away from. They painted Caligula not simply as a tyrant, but as a supernatural horror man who went beyond cruelty into something else entirely. A creature of lust, madness, and shadow, his bedroom became legend, a symbol not of decadence, but of human depravity unbound. Whether truth or embellishment, what they found only deepened the myth. The Senate moved quickly, as if Rome itself could be cleansed of Caligula's memory. But memory does not obey orders. In secret, the whispers continued. Stories of his unspeakable acts, passed from father to son, scribe to student, darkened Rome's collective conscience. Later emperors Nero, Commodus, Caracalla would be compared to him, their own crimes measured against the benchmark of his monstrosity. Historians through the centuries struggled to separate fact from fiction. Was the incest real? Did the secret brothels exist? Psychologists today might see in him the signs of psychopathy, narcissism, or trauma-induced sadism. And his legacy, it never died. Modern media, films, and books continue to obsess over him. Some romanticize his madness. Others exploit his darkness for shock value. Yet the past has a habit of Archaeologists still uncover remnants of the Palatine Hill, hoping to discover more about Rome's emperors. But do we truly want to? The story of Caligula forces us to confront a chilling truth, that the worst monsters are not mythical. They are human, and so, his shadow lingers, in every story of unchecked power, in every whisper of abuse cloaked in grandeur.